Hello everybody, it's lovely to be with you today. I wish this was being done live, but I've been asked to do a recording, so I hope it's okay. But anyway, I'm Amy Stanning, and I've been asked to talk to you talk today about being ourselves at work and why it matters, because it just is so absolutely fundamental in everything we do, whoever we are, that we can be ourselves in every environment. So by way of introduction, there you go, that's me a couple of years ago. I was probably a bit thinner, just talking at a conference. I'm your LGBTQ Postgraduate and Mature Students Officer. I've started doing that in the summer of last year, and I'll keep doing that until my successor takes over at the end of June. I'm a part-time history MA student, currently in my second year, and I hope to be back in the autumn to start a PhD. Prior to coming back to university, because as you can probably guess, I am a mature student, I worked in finance most of my career and actually loved my job. But what's particularly important for the purposes of today is I came out when I was in the world of work, and developed an interest in supporting the LGBT community in the workplace and helping employers be much better environments for LGBT people in particular to work in. And I did have a little business doing that, but sadly COVID put paid to that. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit today about the experience of being LGBT in the workplace. And actually much of what I'm going to be talking about kind of goes beyond the experience of paid work, but kind of any environment where you find yourself. So is being ourselves at work an issue for LGBT people? Well, yeah, it is, and I'll share some information with you later about that. And you know, before we go any further, I'm not telling you everything's wonderful, because it isn't. There still remains a lot of work to do, but I think if I leave you with just a couple of messages in the next 20 minutes or so, one of them would be that the experience of LGBT people in the workplace is a hell of a lot better than it used to be, and in many places actually quite good. And if you're an LGBT person thinking of going into the workplace and you're apprehensive, well, I can understand that, but actually you'll probably find the experience is a lot better than you might imagine. But also, we as LGBT people in the workplace, pardon me, have the opportunity to make it even better for everybody. Of course, it's important, and we'll look at that why, and we'll talk about how we make it all happen, excuse me. So, this actually is a slide I share with businesses when I talk with them. You know, why is it important to create a fully inclusive environment in the workplace? Well, you can read what it says. I'm not going to bore you to death with PowerPoint, but basically, employers run a business, and their objective is to help people become as successful as they possibly can be, to achieve the objectives of the business, to retain people and you know, create a positive environment for their employees. And if people don't feel they belong, if people don't feel they can contribute, if people don't think they're treated fairly or victimized anyway, they'll leave. And you know, that's not good for the performance of the business or any organization. So you know, having an authentic environment, and you know, this lovely favorite phrase of mine, which you probably come across, pink washing. Environments have to be authentic, and they have to be real, because people will see through it. And actually, if employers get it right, people will want to work there, people will stay, they'll perform with their best, the organisation will be regarded as authentic, and the organisation will do better. So what do I mean by authenticity? What is this pink washing thing you've probably heard of? Well, the best way I can describe it is, during Pride Week, lots of businesses stick pride flags in their window, or even better, put posters in the window saying, we support Pride, we support LGBT people, but they do absolutely bugger all about it within the organisation. and the day-to-day experience of employees in that organisation isn't what it might be. That's what I mean by pinkwashing. Anyway, hope that all makes sense. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, if you want to ask me any questions when we're done, because I think they will then be live, well, I hope I will be, that will be absolutely fine, and I'd love that. So, as much as we might have a view about the government, and particularly a Tory government, they do actually say some occasionally useful things. And this is a direct quote from Penny Mordaunt when she was Minister for Women and Equalities a couple of years ago. And it is just worth going through. So for some LGBT people, it can still take immense courage to be themselves. While many battles have been won, complacency is not an option. And I often use that, against the government, because I believe our rights are very hard won, but can be rolled back. But I think the importance of this thing is it really can be quite tough to be LGBT, and we have to always be on our watch about our rights. Excuse me a sec, I just need to get rid of this, which is creating noise, which is not helpful. Right, so moving on. I suppose the first question you're going to say is, okay, Amy, sounding you're talking to us about being an out LGBT person at work, but kind of what was your experience? Yeah. I'll share a little bit about that with you, because I think sometimes the personal story can just help sort of paint some pictures, and also, I suppose, just being honest, I do know a little bit about, I do know what I'm talking about. That's what I'm trying to say. So how was it for me? So I had a good career. I started at the bottom. I didn't end up at the top. It wasn't one of those, but I did okay. And as I say, I worked with some amazing people, worked in a really great part of the business, and I loved my job, particularly towards the end. Wasn't always that way. And the early part of my career, I was not out. I was not myself. And I kind of did okay and kind of rose through the ranks. But the best way I can describe it was, I always felt there was something weighing me down, because I knew there was a really important, vital part about who I was and how I felt that I just could not express in the workplace. And this is a few years ago, and the environment was very different. And I suppose as time goes on and your commitments vary, kind of being the breadwinner as it was, you become very anxious about doing anything that could prejudice your ability to put bread on the table, because people depend on you. But things do change, and the environment I was working in changed enormously, probably beyond all recognition, in terms of support for LGBT people and a positive, affirming culture. But also kind of in my own life, without being too melodramatic, I got to a point where I just couldn't carry on as I was, kind of living a lie and not being who I was. And I absolutely got to the stage at which I needed to live as me, and present the person I knew myself to be to the world. And that's not an easy thing. But one day I knew I had to do this, so I plucked up the courage to contact a colleague in HR, in personnel, if you like, and I said, I need to talk to you. And I kind of explained very anxiously what I needed to talk about. And she said, great, come on in. And I went up. I was working in London at the time. I went up to Canary Wharf. We met in a coffee bar. And I was really anxious, very, very nervous, petrified, actually, probably a better way of describing it. But my colleague, Karen was her name, was absolutely brilliant. And basically, the message quite simply was, you do what you need to do. Don't worry about your job. Don't worry about your job at all, because the organisation will make whatever you need to happen, and will work out a plan. And that's what happened, actually. And I had a job of some seniority. I was running a team of 25 direct reports, probably about 500-600 people that kind of I was responsible for. and I worked in multiple locations, so my job was very public. So kind of the whole thing needed to be managed very carefully, and it was. And kind of shared with my team what was happening, and they were trained by a LGBT charity on kind of what it meant and what I'd be going through. And yeah, I'd say the organisation was brilliant. They were really, really good and really, really supportive of me and also the person that worked around them. Because when somebody goes through such a fundamental change, it's really important that the needs of the people around you, who will come from a wide variety of experiences and environments, are supported and helped to understand. And I think things are a little better these days, but the reality is most people get their information about LGBT people from trash media. And so you have to take them on the journey with you. You can't expect them to be where you want them to be. Anyway, that all went really well. Kind of the big news of Amy very quickly became yesterday's chip paper, and we just got on with it. And this huge weight that I've been carrying around on my shoulders that have been kind of holding me back and grinding me down, all of a sudden I realized it gone, and I just felt so comfortable being myself in the workplace, with a lot of support, has to be said, from my boss, from my team, from my peers. And I can genuinely say I had no issues in the workplace. And actually, going beyond that, the workplace became a really positive place for me. It became a very safe, secure place. Bearing in mind, I could be in a different location every day. I could be in Southampton one day, London the next, Canterbury the next, Maidstone, Woking, etc. That's where I was working. But everywhere I knew, people had got my back. My boss had got me back. And if I did get any unfair treatment, that I could call on the organisation to support me and to deal with it. And work became this really safe space for me, unlike at times the world outside. So at work, I knew I was safe and secure and could relax. I didn't have to give everything a double glance, be very conscious of who was looking at me and all that kind of stuff. When I was travelling to work, particularly if I was on public transport, that's when I had to worry. And I was never violently attacked, but I was attacked a couple of times. It wasn't nice, but work was kind of really space. So that's really, really special, and that's really, really important. And this is a few years ago, and I think things, particularly in larger employers, have changed and improved even more since then. So let's kind of develop this a little bit more. So what is the reality of being out at work? Well, this is recent research from a joint report published a couple of years ago by Stonewall and YouGov on LGBT people in Britain. It is a fact that 35% plus of staff, LGBT staff, hide their identity at work. And for younger people, that's even higher. Absolutely tragic, absolutely tragic. LGBT staff have a higher incidence of mental health related absence. Not surprising. If you spend half your life, as I did, covering up who you really are, that has a cost. The fact you're employing mental energy in covering up who you are, inventing a false narrative, trying to be something you're not, is costly, and it catches up with you. 20% of trans people in the workplace don't dress in line with their identity. Again, tragic. So there are real issues, but I think another key message for you is so many employers are enlightened and actually working really hard to create a positive and supportive environment for LGBT people. So why does all this matter? Again, this is a slide I share with employers, with companies when I talk to them. You can read the words yourself. And we kind of covered a little bit of this earlier, but staff who feel included and able to be themselves are happier. They're more productive, they're more innovative, they'll stay, they have less absence and stress. All this is true. So what are the key ingredients and how do these things happen? And I think many, many places have got this, and many are working towards it. One of the things I have done in recent years, I've worked with Manchester Pride, which is a charity, who have adopted what they call the All Equals Charter, which sets standards for all sorts of employers, ranging from like small bars in the village through to a university, a health authority, a multinational company, to develop a framework which kind of covers all of this, which actually creates a positive place for the employee at work. And I did some work with many of those firms just over a year ago, actually giving them feedback on where they were and helping them improve. And that was a really amazing piece of work to do. So the first thing is kind of the organizational culture of the organization. Like I said, you've got to be authentic. And kind of when you're looking around for jobs and employers, these are the kind of things that need to be on your little list. What is the organizational culture of the organization? What does it feel to work there? Who do you know works there, can tell you about it? What do you see of their PR and their stuff online? That will tell you a lot. Leadership. Things happen because people want them to happen. They don't happen just by magic. Leaders have to lead and create the environment and set the tone for what they're trying to do. Allies are vital. Allies are vital. Much as we might want it to be, not everybody's LGBTQ+, but there are so many people out there who are amazing allies. And just as an aside on allies, I hope you're aware of the Safe Home Base scheme that the university LGBT staff networks put in place to create a network of allies in all departments that are there as signposts for you as an LGBT person. If you ever want to talk to anybody or you need any help, they're not there to counsel, advise, or guide anything. They're there to help you find the place you need, and they'll do that. Role models. I passionately believe that LGBT people in the workplace, particularly those who have any degree of responsibility or seniority, have to be role models. There's this horrible phrase about pulling the ladder up. Yeah, it's often said, sadly, about successful women in the workplace that they pull the ladder up, which basically prevents other women from following them. I absolutely believe that everybody in the workplace needs to pass the ladder down so other people can climb it. Employee networks are really important. I mentioned a minute ago the university LGBT colleague network, which is growing, doing some great work. Hopefully some of you have been to the History Month events. If you haven't already registered, there's one on Thursday this week. The amazing Dr. Sam Richards talking about St. George. You may think St. George has a masculine identity. Think again. St. George had a very fluid identity in different cultures, particularly as the persona of St. George developed over the ages. Anyway, enough of the commercial. Have a look out for it. It's going to be good. But employee networks are so important because they enable you to network with, reach out to, and embrace, perhaps in more ways than one, LGBT colleagues and help you make a difference in the organization. I ran Barclays LGBT colleague network for 3 years. I got to see the Holy of Holies, the group chief executive, the big cheese that makes everything happen, who wanted to know what I thought. Yeah. And the LGBT colleague network influenced a lot of things, like the trans healthcare policy, like the advertising policy of the organization, like the use of or development of policies internally within the organization, like the use of images in the organization, and also external stuff. Not to mention participation in Pride. I love Pride, and one year I actually went to, I think it was about 18 Prides in 1 year when I was kind of leading that work. Amazing. All in my own time, I have to say. And dialogue is really important within an organisation through everything that's kind of on that slide, working together to make sure the LGBTQ+ colleagues' voice is heard. I like to end kind of on that slide. The guy in the middle is a dear friend of mine. He's called Rob. He's a senior manager at Barclays. I had the privilege of working with him twice. And if you didn't know him, you would pigeonhole, and you came across it, you'd pigeonhole him as the kind of straight, macho, beer swilling, bike riding male who perhaps didn't have too much empathy for the LGBT community. Well, there he is with two friends he made on the day in Bournemouth Pride. And this guy, well, I challenged my team, should I say, when I started working with them about what they were doing to increase diversity in the workplace and how they were making a difference for their LGBT colleagues. And this guy said to me in a business meeting one day, he said, look, what do I have to do? I said, it's really simple. Just reach out to your local community LGBT organisations. If you haven't recognised that lovely scenery, it's Bournemouth. Go and find your LGBT group in Bournemouth and just ask them what they think of you, what they think of our company, what they think of dealing with you, and how you can help. So he did, bless him. And they said, yeah, what we'd really like you to do is help us with Pride. Can you provide marshals? Can you participate? Can you give us some money? And basically the answer to all those three questions was yes. And there's Rob, who'd never been to a Pride before in his life. He was a marshal on the day of that Pride, which is actually in glorious hot weather, as you can tell. And the following year, he was head of security and played a leading role in making Pride happen. And he's an amazing ally, and I'm in touch with him still. I love him to bits, but yeah, he's just the kind of person that's in the workplace waiting for you to meet them, that if you kind of reach out a little bit, will support you in just being yourself, in achieving your potential, and will show you so much love and be an amazing role model. So when you go into the world of work, be yourself, contribute to the change, be an activist, and get involved. I hope you found that interesting, and if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.